Good morning, school. I would hazard a guess that you don't recognise either the name or the photo of Ludwig Zamenhof. As an MFL teacher, I'm frequently asked, why can't we all speak the same language? And you've probably heard my admittedly somewhat unsatisfactory response along the lines of, that's the way the world developed, or that I really am not in charge of the world, or indeed the complexities of Spanish grammar. Zamenhof may just be able to help with that question. Zamenhof was an ophthalmologist by profession and lived most of his life in Warsaw, Poland. The young Zamenhof was fascinated by the idea of a world without war and began working on developing his own universal second language while still in school. I think we tend to think of multiculturalism as a modern thing, something that has only happened in recent times, where people from different countries, cultures, religions and languages live alongside each other. Here, an extract from a letter written to a friend in 1895, Zamenhof demonstrates the complexity of living in a multicultural, multilingual society. The place where I was born and spent my childhood gave direction to all my future struggles. In Białystok, the inhabitants were divided into 4 distinct elements: Russians, Poles, Germans and Jews. Each of these spoke their own language and looked on all the others as enemies. In such a town, a sensitive nature feels more acutely than elsewhere the misery caused by language division, and sees at every step that the diversity of languages is the first, or at least the most influential, basis for the separation of the human family into groups of enemies. I was brought up as an idealist. I was taught that all people were brothers. While outside in the street at every step, I felt that there were no people, only Russians, Poles, Germans, Jews, and so on. This was always a great torment for my infant mind, although many people may smile at such an anguish for the world in a child. Since at that time I thought that grown-ups were omnipotent, so I often said to myself that when I grew up, I would certainly destroy this evil. Zamenhof completed his language development by the time he was 19. That's right, he had made up a whole language by the time most of us are just thinking about what we want to do with our lives. But he didn't manage to get his book entitled International Language published until a little over 10 years later. It was published using the pseudonym Dr. Esperanto. That means literally Dr. Hoper or Dr. Hopeful. Those who bought the book and began to work on the language referred to it as Esperanto. Hence, Zamenhof's language was given its name, Esperanto. 1907 saw the first Esperanto International Conference held in Boulogne in France. The conference has been held annually every year since, all across the world, with the exception of the years during the World Wars and more recently 2020, where COVID forced the conference online. The photos you can see here are of Zamenhof himself speaking at one such conference and a group photo from the 1911 conference held in Antwerp. Sadly, while Zamenhof's intentions may have been to bring about universal peace through improved mutual understanding, the earlier 20th century had other ideas. He died in 1917 whilst war raged around him, and had he lived a further 20 years, he would have seen many of his followers round up and shot during World War II. I feel quite sure that this was never part of his plan, but groups of revolutionary Esperantists spread across Europe between the wars, causing considerable consternation amongst the ruling elite. Stalin referred to it as that dangerous language, and he had Esperantists deported or shot. Hitler described it as a tool of Jewish domination, and it was not allowed to be taught in the concentration camps, although Esperantists sometimes got around this by convincing guards that they were teaching Italian. It's worth noting here that 3 of Zamenhof's own children were killed in Treblinka, but that his granddaughter both taught and promoted her grandfather's language right up to her recent death in 2017. France banned the language in schools, and in Japan, speakers were also persecuted and killed. In Spain, Franco declared the language a communist plot, and it was banned in Portugal under a white-ring government for many years. In more modern times, little appears to have changed. In Saddam Hussein's Iraq, teachers of Esperanto were deported, and in Tanzania, 2 Swedish citizens were beaten by police for attempting to teach the language. So what's all the fuss about? What makes this language unique? How and why is it easy to learn? The more eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted the links between Esperanto and l'espoir in French, hope, or la esperanza in Spanish. Hence Dr. Esperanto being Dr. Hope, Dr. Hopeful. Speakers of Esperanto are called Esperantists or hopers, or my personal favourite, hopefulists. So Zamenhof was the founder, the developer, if you like, of what is termed a constructive, auxiliary or helping second language. It was never his intention to have every nation in the world speak his language over their own. Indeed, he recognised the symbolism and therefore the importance of language in a country's national identity, its culture, way of thinking and doing things. His aim was to simplify language acquisition to the point that anyone could learn his language quickly, and therefore communicate with anyone else in the world who also spoke it. It's a way of breaking down barriers, of developing mutual respect through efficient communication, and ultimately, as was his dream, it could prevent conflict and wars. So in short, there are only 16 basic rules and not one single exception. No irregular verbs and only 6 verb endings across all tenses. Most people are able to begin speaking Esperanto within an hour of immersive learning. Whilst it seems that the importance of Zamenhof's achievement has been noted globally, the language itself lacks support at the international level. Although nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 12 times, for example, Zamenhof sadly never won. Some recent wins for the language include 100 years after his death in 2017, Zamenhof being named one of UNESCO's eminent personalities, and he has also been the subject of a Google Doodle. Despite having a largely European basis, particularly in Latin-based Romance languages, Spanish, French included there, Esperanto's vocabulary is also 1/10 German and Slavic in origin, and his followers come from as far afield as China, Japan, Vietnam, Estonia, Finland and Hungary, and it is particularly popular in Brazil. Whilst never adopted as an official language of the UN or any other international organisation for that matter, Esperantists developed their own flag. Composed of a green and white background with a green star, the green symbolises hope, the white symbolises peace and neutrality, and the 5-pointed star represents the 5 continents. In more modern times, Esperanto has been taught in schools the world over. The Universal Esperanto Association has an official consultative relationship with the UN, and the Vatican Radio has an Esperanto version of its website. Since 2001, China has used Esperanto for the daily news on one of its official websites, and in 2012, Google Translate added Esperanto as its 64th language. Other translation websites have followed, and there are 240,000 articles written in Esperanto on Wikipedia. That puts it on a level with Turkish, which is a language with over 70 million speakers. You're probably familiar with Duo if you've ever tried to learn a language online. He's the Duolingo mascot, of course, and in 2015, Esperanto was added to Duolingo's growing list of languages it offers to its users free of charge. Numbers of Esperanto speakers in the world remain low in real terms, but the movement, through the popularity of the internet, has gained more ground than ever in recent years. I'll leave you with a popular children's nursery rhyme that has been translated into Esperanto. Can you guess what it is? Your form teacher has the answer. Commendations for the first person to find me and explain what happens with masculine and feminine words in Esperanto. Can you find a number in the rhyme and tell me it in both Esperanto and English? And find a word which is similar to its Spanish counterpart and another which is similar to its Italian counterpart. The picture gives you a clue if you're not sure what the rhyme's about.